Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first ever one-on-one with Up2Us Sports. And today we're joined by someone who I've been anxiously waiting having this conversation with. She's a WNBA champion, an all-star. She's an Up2Us Sports ambassador, the author of the first and soon-to-be bestseller book, They Better Call Me Sugar, My Journey from the Hood to the Hardwood. And she's featured in a documentary which you can find on YouTube, Scratching the Surface, Sugar Rodgers' Sweet Connection to Gold and the Emotional Return Home. And so I want you all to please welcome Miss Sugar Rodgers.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, so this has been in the works for a minute, Sugar, and I've been, like I said, I've been really excited to have this conversation with you, mainly because you know, what we do and the youth that we work with, really, you are our youth. You are that kid. And so this is what we do this for. We're an organization that supports and trains coaches who work with kids who are coming out of some of the most impoverished communities, underserved communities, kids who just need to have that strong mentor and coach behind them. And so to hear your story in your book and also your documentary, it just has always put me in this space of this is why we do this. This is why we do this. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I had an opportunity to catch you on the MBS Sports Hour with Joe and Pat. So shout out to Joe and Pat on the podcast last night. And you talked a lot about your transition from being a player to being a coach to, these different facets that are happening now in your life. And so let's jump in and let's talk a little bit about, first of all, the book. So I want to show everybody the book.
Oh, honey,
Right? Oh, I have it. I keep it with me. I refer to it often. We're going to have information about how you can purchase the book in the chat. So everybody, you can just keep checking on that. But really, tell me a little bit about how did you get to this decision? Because you reveal some really personal stuff in the book about your childhood, about how you grew up. So how did you get to that point where you said, now it's time for me to speak my truth about who I am and how I got here?
I think for the most part, like when I was in college, one of my coaches was like, "Look, I suggest that you go to therapy. I understand like you went through a lot of and had a lot of childhood trauma." So I was like, a little iffy about it, and I went, and I never talked really in the sessions. So the therapist was like, "How about you just write it down?" And that's how I came about like really telling my truth. And when I wrote those stories down, I would go back and read them like, "Oh man, like you really went through all of this." Like just talking to myself. And I was like, I need to share these stories because I know like somebody's out there going through some of the same things or something more difficult than what I went through. And I was like, let's just write, like, I'm gonna write a book. So my junior year, I could have graduated college, and I decided like I was gonna stay. And then my senior year, I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And then I took like an independent class where it focused on writing a book. I know some of y'all like, oh, it just came out, but taking a book and taking and writing a book, it takes time. And then just having to go to therapy and continue to get these stories out in the way that I wanted to get them out. And then having to dig into all of the trauma that I had that I never really dealt with because I used to compartmentalize a lot of those things and didn't really want to talk about those things. But I was like, oh no, if I write a book, I share it, it'll be able to help somebody. So that's what I did.
So what was that process like for you? So as someone who has a background in therapy, right? For years, I was a licensed therapist, and you're one of those, clients that we get that it's like, how do we get you to talk? How do we get you? And thankfully, you found a therapist who knew how to work with what your strengths were to get you to open up. But was the writing itself sort of like a therapeutic process for you? Did it help you to then speak it as well? Or was it just, let me just write it out? Let me just write it. Is it more comfortable that way? Or what was that process like for you?
Uh, It was therapeutic to just see it on paper. Like I said, to be able to go back and read and see like what I've been through. Because I used to just sit in there and he would just talk to me. And then I wanted to share a story, but then I would just break down and just start crying. So I was like, I really didn't like crying because when growing up, I really didn't have nobody to lean on or to go talk to about like my emotions and my feelings. And as a young woman, like we in my community, I'm like taught not to cry. So if I fall down and hurt myself, it's like get up and try again. Like you can't deal with those emotions. So when I went in, I mean, he said like just write them down, and then just writing them down was the best thing that ever happened to me, and the reason why I was able to get those stories out on paper and into a book.
Sure, sure. So let's talk about your coaches, right? And how, because you've had several, right? From the time from between basketball and golf, you've had several coaches throughout your lifetime. So how instrumental in the book you talk about Coach Betty, who was one of the coaches that took you in after your mom passed, and you learned some lessons from her, both good and bad, right? Both good and bad. So, how instrumental were your coaches or even mentors throughout your community? Because we have them, right? They're there in the community, and they don't always look like people think they should look, right? You came across drug dealers in your community, but some would say that even in them, there was some mentoring that was happening. So, how instrumental were those people in your life from childhood going on up?
I think the coaches and the mentors, and like you said, like sometimes it was the drug dealers sharing knowledge about whatever life lesson it was, but they played a significant role in my life. For the most part, just giving me an outlet to just be myself and then encouraging me when I didn't believe in myself. And also like Coach Betty, like giving me a place to stay when I was in a tough situation, whether it was giving me a practice, just teaching me how to be a woman. I mean, I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for the coaches and mentors I've had in my life.
Sure. So now you're stepping into the role of being a coach, right?
Yeah.
On two different levels. On two different levels. For those of you who don't know, Sugar is now coaching for the Las Vegas Aces, of which a team of which you played for, and also a coach at Georgetown, again another team of which you played for. So, what does that look like for you? What do you take with you as a player into this coaching space now?
I mean, some people like I don't want to just be considered like a basketball coach. I want to be considered a life coach
Mm,
because through basketball you can teach a lot of different life lessons, and
mhm,
that's what I was able to learn and pick up from the individuals or the coaches and mentors that I had in my life.
mhm.
Because it's not just about basketball; it's how to get these young women and young men. I mean, these boys and girls to become young women and young men.
Sure.
Um, so that's kind of how like I look at the whole picture of like I'm a life coach, not like a basketball coach.
That's interesting. That's interesting that you say that because, you know, I think that sometimes people go into coaching think that that's all that they're going to do, that it's simply about the sport itself. And especially when you work with kids in under resourced communities, that there's so much more going on in their lives that sometimes it takes a minute to even get to the sport because you have to deal with the life stuff. So, did you find that the coaches that you had were they capable in addressing some of the issues, or were they just kind of inadvertently guiding you and helping you, or was it really intentional for them?
Some just help out of the kindness of their hearts. I see now like some help because they had some type of agenda when it came to me and the success that they probably could see in the future. But for the ones who just, you know, came into the community like, look, let me just grasp and understand like what you're going through. Because some of them came from the suburbs and
Sure,
some came from within the community.
sure.
So, the ones who did want to educate themselves, dealing with a child who has like anxiety, stress, and trauma, and understanding what that looks like in the supported community. A lot of the times, the coaches and mentors in the communities, some of them can't relate to the young women and young men that are going through these things, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just have to educate yourself and understand what it looks like firsthand.
Sure, sure. And as a kid from a community, right, that's struggling, from a community that has some poverty, can you speak a little bit about what does that help mean, right? From people who are coming in, what does that help look like? Does that look like, someone who thinks they know better than you, what needs to happen for you and your community? Or are you looking for someone to come in and say, hey, help me rise up out of this, right? As opposed to teach me about it because you live it, right? So what do we in the coaching community need to do better or do differently?
I don't believe that someone like who hasn't experienced poverty can come in and teach you about what you live as far as poverty firsthand. I believe they have the resources to assist and help break some of the vicious cycles and help improve some of the things that we may be going through. But the key question is like, can you change the economic to fulfill everyone's needs? And let's be honest, like the system is broken and it has been for many years. So we must think about like how the system can be bent and changed to fit everyone's needs. So I mean that's pretty much like my take on it.
Sure,
People
sure,
can agree to disagree, but if you have the resources, like come on in and help. But
sure,
don't tell me like what it's like to live in poverty. Like I live this every day. Like
sure,
every day I wake up, like I'm in this.
sure,
But we're open to the resource so that we can get out of this situation, so
sure.
that we can be better, so we can break some of these cycles that's been going on for so long.
Awesome. So what do you say to the kids, the young kids who are like you, right? Because they're there, especially these young girls who are struggling, who may have had a parent who, is either in and out of jail or a parent who has passed away. And there's all of these traumatic events or stressful events that are occurring within their lives because of their circumstances. What do you say to those little girls, to those little boys?
Just keep pushing, take one day at a time. Like I never looked at what tomorrow is going to be, because I'm just like, oh man, it may be the same as today, it may be worse, but I just kept dreaming. The more you dream, don't let anybody kill your dreams, for one, because there's going to be a lot of naysayers like, oh, you can't do this. You can, but you can. If you really keep trying, you put all your energy and effort to it, you can make it out.
Sure. Do you ever see yourself working with youth? Listen, I'm asking a lot because listen, you're already working with professional players, you're playing with collegiate players. But do you ever see yourself, or have you? I'm sure you've done camps and stuff before. How is that different? How is that, because you're catching them young when you do it that way. So do you ever see yourself after the college season is over and the professional season is over, then you dip into a camp and work with some young people?
I did a camp back home where I was only able to do it 1 year just because of my schedule, but
Sure.
I still have relationships with all those kids. A lot of those kids at my camp, and them reaching out and just going up like, look, Sugar, I did this, this, and a third, or I'm about to go to this, 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 and these colleges. And I'm just like, oh man, like that's amazing. And they talk about, you remember that time I came to your camp and I was doing this and you told me this and you told me I could do it. And that'd be the thing that be so touching. Like,
Yeah,
because you said they can do it, they really believe they can do it. And they was able to do it off of some kind words that I just said to them, like, look,
yeah,
you can make it out. You can go be this. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever the case may be. Just to see them doing it, it's just like, oh man, like
yeah.
the feeling in the heart.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And knowing what you know, right, just from your background and now from coaching, how does that shape you now? Like how does that, it's like when you're a player and you think about, oh, if I ever coach, I'm gonna make my kids run, I'm gonna make them do this, I'm gonna, you know what I mean? You think about all those things that your coaches did for you, right? And you think about, I'm gonna do that or I'm not gonna do that, right? How has this shaped you now as a coach? You're stepping into this area where now you can listen to your players and look at your players from a different lens. So, what does that do for you as a coach?
I think first and foremost, like I wouldn't be the woman I am today if I didn't experience or go through those tough times. But they showed me like all those lessons just showed me how to overcome like adversity. And I always said like as a coach, like I'm not gonna be a yeller because I didn't really like people yelling at me. I've always said like out of respect, like you can come talk to me. And knowing times like you gotta dig in me to get some good things out. But I was like, I'm not gonna be a yeller, like I'm gonna talk through the situation, dissect it, and then we'll just go from there. Just being like a player's coach and being able to relate. Like I was once in your shoes, and this is what I had to do, and this is what you may have to do to be successful through sports, and just showing them how to use sports as a vehicle to create other opportunities. Because I think sometimes people just focus on the basketball when it came to me and not showing me how to network
Mhm.
and create other opportunities for the future. So
Mhm.
that's kind of like my thing because everybody can't go professional. Everybody's not going to play sports. Some people are not going to make it through high school.
Sure.
But how can we use that to create other opportunities? And how can we use that to build networks for us to have different resources going forward?
Sure, sure. So what has it done for you? I mean, here you are, you're coaching, but you've got a lot of things in the works, right? You got your master's degree. And so what were those lessons? Let's talk a little bit about those lessons, those life lessons, those business lessons, right? Because some of that is in there as well. Um, can you talk a little bit about what were those lessons and what could you potentially be, right? What could you potentially do with all of this?
Um, I mean, it's a lot of lessons. I think my thing was like relationships. I try not to have bad relationships with people because you never know when you're going to need somebody. So that's kind of like the first lesson of mine. And then just keeping in contact with people. So I always keep in contact with like my professors. Here's an example. Like I kept in contact with my athletic directors at Georgetown University,
Mhm.
and they was able to make a way for me to go back to school to get my master's degree for free, so then I didn't have to pay. But that was just all about networking and keeping in contact and checking and see. I mean, is there any other life lessons that you learned through your journey?
Yeah. I think that, it's one of those things that you don't realize that that's what you're getting, right? Unless a coach does it intentionally. And we do have coaches, right? Hopefully, our coaches at Up to Us Sports are doing it intentionally. But I think there's a lot of coaches that unintentionally teach some lessons um, about not giving up, about there's going to be times where things are rough and you have to find some way to dig deep and push through and overcome those types of obstacles. And so those are the things I think as I got older, I realized, yeah, I think I learned that when I played sports, actually, and it kind of set me up for that. And now I, too, as a coach, try to intentionally do that now with my youth is here's the lesson I want you to get from it, but I want you to take this with you in life as well. And make it a little bit more intentional, I think, than what coaches that I had before did with me. But it's interesting because, the Olympics are on now, right? And everybody's talking about Simone Biles and all of these youth. But I want to ask you, as a athlete of color, as a Black woman, what is that pressure like, right? When and you've played at the highest level. What is that pressure like? Because you'll hear a lot of people say, you don't give up on your team. You don't, people have these criticisms of young athletes, especially athletes of color, about how they're showing up and being teammates and achieving their goals without really knowing for sure what that pressure is like. So, what is that pressure like?
I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you every time you step out there. I mean, you got to show up for your family, your teammates, for the fans every night. I think the pressure, far as like mentally, sometimes we don't understand like what people are going through mentally. So for her to drop out and say, "Look, I have something going through mentally," like we should never question that because mental health is real. You see it. take people out of here every day. So just to once somebody say that, it shouldn't be no more question in my eyes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So once they say, I'm like, all right, done. Like, it's nothing. Like, let her be and let her take a break. Like, she's on the highest level. Like, to be able to play at the Olympics and do what she do day in and night out. I mean, I can only imagine, that type of pressure.
Sure.
Um, so just take
Yeah.
a time like to educate yourself on mental health awareness.
Yeah, I think, that's a big difference, Sugar. Like I said, I'm a little bit older than you. And when we were younger, there was no real conversation, especially not for athletes, because athletes were perceived as these superhuman, super strong, mentally strong people, who can overcome anything, right? That's what the perception was. Wasn't the truth, right? But that's what the perception was. And so we didn't have those conversations about mental health and taking care of yourself and making sure that you're mentally and physically well, because it's all connected, right? When you're not mentally well, you set yourself up for not being physically well as well. And so it's just a different time. So I'm glad that the conversations are happening, right? That we allow young people to say, I've got to take note of where I am mentally. And if that means I have to check out of my sport for a minute, that's okay. That's okay to do it. And I'm hoping that through, our programs and what we're teaching coaches to do, I'm hoping that we're moving in that direction right now, that coaches aren't the ones who are pushing for you to continue on, but are the ones who are stepping back and saying, let's take a pause for a minute and let's make sure that you're okay.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes you
so
just need a mental break. Like,
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
tell them, even on my job, I'm like, all right, it's too much going on. Like, I need a mental break.
yeah,
But we should be able to take a pause and take a deep breath because it's so much pressure on athletes to perform.
yeah,
It's so much pressure for people who just on a regular job like to perform.
yeah,
So I mean, if you need a mental break, you need a pause, like take it.
sure. What do you think the role is in social media? Because that's a big thing. Are you on social media? Are you? I know people follow you and all of that, but what's that pressure like? I mean, people are, oh, Sugar, we think you're wonderful, but it's not always all good.
No, it's not, especially when you're losing. It's
Right.
But sometimes I don't like get on social media. And then I have like my cousin, she'll just get up there, log in and do some things for me. But social media is a different ball game
Yeah. Yeah.
when it comes to like mental health awareness,
Absolutely.
because a lot of people don't live what they post on social media.
Yeah.
So when they go home, it's just like a reality check. Like, this is how I'm living. So I mean, it could be false advertisement in a sense. So you
Yeah.
definitely gotta be careful. You got to be careful when you introduce your kids to social media. It needs to be some lessons given because a lot of things young people post can hunt them in the future
Sure.
when it comes to getting jobs. So it's something that they posted on social media, something that they said. You see a lot of things pop up from what you said when you were younger. As an athlete, like,
Mhm.
that that was gonna hunt you later on.
That's right.
He's gonna be like this mega star. So just educating yourself on the social media, how it can help your life and how it can hurt your life.
Absolutely. And I think, that's a part of the mental health thing too. You've got to learn how to disconnect at some point. Um, Sometimes what you don't see and what you can't hear can't hurt you. And if you're always connected to it and always watching it and always looking for, that response of how somebody is going to react to things that you're doing, it's like you're constantly connected. So I really hope people sort of learn with social media that it's okay to disconnect. It's all right to
Just
give yourself,
activate the thing. That's what
yeah,
they say. Just activate for a few days. Um,
absolutely. 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 So now we're in the coaching space, you know, you're in a writing space. Will there be more books?
Probably in the future. I'm looking forward to a part two, just because
Okay.
of some of the negative reactions I got from like family and friends and some people close to me, and some of the positive things that are going on in my life
Sure.
that I want to share, and the negative things. I think it's like some stories that I would actually want to touch on a little bit more, just to elaborate, just to clear the air, and then just share some of the great things that I'm doing and will continue to do.
Sure. Will you do a book, sort of a guiding book? You know what I mean? I kind of see that for you, this book of guiding young people towards, you know what I mean? Not necessarily down certain paths, but if you go down this path of playing sports, or even if you're an entertainer or a musician or whatever, like, is there a book in you that talks about, just those things to look out for? And here's how you do it and do it well, because you've done it well. You've done it well.
I can see that, but I'm more like a storyteller when it comes to my life, and
Sure.
just keep it in more so like a memoir, kind of like the first book that I did. I think I did a pretty good job to finally get it out after all this time, but hopefully one day I'll be able to sit down and push a second book out.
Yeah. Yeah. A second, a third.
Nah, you're pushing it down when you say a third. But
You
who
never
knows?
know.
Maybe a third. I mean, it just depends on like what headspace, what it is that I'm doing, like how much time like I have to invest, and then having to go back and continue to like go to therapy to get those stories out,
Sure.
because it's like digging in that trauma and like ripping the band-aid off or ripping the scab off an old cut.
Sure. Sure.
So
So is the trauma ever gone? I mean, I know the answer to this, but some people may not know. Does the trauma ever go away? Or is it always sort of lurking?
it definitely lurks. I don't say it goes away because it's just like sometimes something else just pops up and it triggers
Hmm.
something that happened in my past. Especially when it comes to like death. That's like one of the
Hmm.
big ones for me. When somebody close dies, it always
Yeah.
triggers back to me losing my mom and then me losing my nephew. And then I kind of get in this like grieving stage because I think I've only grieved maybe two times in my life when it came to my mom. And I wasn't able to do it properly the first time. And now I know like the signs of, different things, but it definitely lurks around. I wouldn't say it just goes away. Like we know how to compartmentalize certain things that happen to us, and we try to bury them deep and throw away the key. But they'll come back up.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw the documentary that you did and was just, I was just right there with you, right? Like just sort of reliving and seeing different places. Again, like you said, that sort of trigger these memories and trigger emotions and feelings about different things. So what sort of space did that put you in? Was that just a surreal moment going back?
Um, so I've been back to the neighborhood,
Hmm.
and I've never been back to the church until that day. So
Hmm.
like I haven't been in there since my mom passed, and they always ask me to like come speak and
Sure.
come do certain things instead of just saying like I can't handle it. I just would say no,
Hmm.
but I knew the reason why, but I couldn't share at that very moment. So when Stretch TV, they asked to do a story on me through golf. I was like, all right, cool. Like now's the time. Like I can do this. Like I'm gonna go back in the church. And as soon as I went back in there, it was just like this cold, chill feeling that came over the top of me. It was like I accomplished something when
Yeah.
I went in, and I faced like a fear of like going back. But it was also like, man, like I really did sit in this same spot
Hmm.
as a young child
Yeah.
and watch my mom be carried out of this church. It just triggers some, it's like trauma, like that trauma comes back. And when I left out of the church, it was like, all right, like I overcame something. I could go back in there now and speak and do certain things that the church asked me
Sure.
instead of just keep running away all these years.
Yeah, it's, there's something that happens as someone who's lost their mother as well, not as young as you. And I can't even imagine what that feeling is like. But as for people who have lost a parent, right? And your mom was she was your rock. She was your first mentor, right? Um, so to lose that person It's difficult to go back into spaces where you remember that person. It's difficult to go back into spaces where the threat of that trigger may happen. And so I'm glad when I saw you do that. um, as a therapist, that's one of those moments where you're like, yes, she's growing through it, and certainly not going to get over it, but growing through it to a point where it's not crippling anymore. And I hope that's what happens for our young people, is that people recognize that you can grow through something. It's not going to go away completely, but at least to get people to a point where they're not crippled by some of the circumstances that happen. And so I was just so happy and so moved by that whole documentary. I think it was, pretty phenomenal. It was done really well. But what about golf? Because that was a mom thing too. So any plans for it? I told y'all she does everything. You are the type of young lady that, for me as a mother who has daughters, right, who are athletes, not much younger than you are the young lady that we hope our daughters to become, that we want them to be able to recognize that they have weaknesses and things that they need to work through. We want them to, find the strength to do it anyway.
Mhm.
We want them to reach for these different goals and things that they never thought they would be able to do. And so that's why I say to you, this is such an important conversation. And I hope for young people out there that they get this, that there's so much more than you can ever even imagine that you can become. And so, yeah, so golf. Are we going back to golf? Are we hitting the PGA tour? What are we doing?
Um, as of right now, with the two jobs, I can't really fit it in, but as like a hobby, like just to be able to go out there and still hit the golf balls and
Sure.
go out there and just, even if I just sometimes go out there by myself and I just imagine like my mom is here. But just know, like if my mom was here, I would not be playing in the WNBA. I would be on the LPGA tour right
That's
now.
interesting.
Um, but no, like I mean, I still play as a hobby, and hopefully one day, like I can go like on a pro am tour and do some stuff, or just go on some of the like celebrity tours that they
Sure.
have.
How did your mom get you into golf? How did that even start?
So one of my friends, his name was Lil Ben. He played golf. I'm like, golf, that's a white people's sport. Like that's just what I believe.
Right.
I never
Right.
knew anybody besides like Tiger Woods. Outside of that, I'm just like, no, that's like a white person sport. That's just how I viewed it at that time. And then his dad was like, well, kind of come out there. I mean, I knocked the church one day out, as most people would read in the book. And then a golf coach asked me, but Mr. Ben, his dad, was the one who like really introduced me and got me like very into the game. And I went out there and I was just like a natural talent. Like they just showed me like little technique, like how to swing and keeping your eye down and all of that. But once I picked that up, like I was able to go advance quick. And when I brought it back to my mom was like, "What? Like that's a white person sport." Now you see where I got it from. I got it from my mom. But she was open. She was like, "If you're gonna put all your energy and effort into it, you can do it. If not, like, don't waste my money and don't waste my time."
Yeah,
Clear as day. Like, won't too
absolutely.
much money to waste on you and having to buy your uniform and having to pay for you to go and catch a ride and do. So once I got into it, I mean, I lost my first tournament. My mom used to come to every practice, every tournament that I had. And when I lost that first one, I came in third place. I was so mad, so mad. And after that, she came and I would like win first place
Yeah,
almost every single time.
yeah. What you touched on a little bit of something. We have a question from our audience as well that goes along with this. So, golf is not a cheap sport. Um, and I think your mom had the conversation with you that I had with my daughters who play volleyball, which is not a cheap sport. And that is, if you're going to do it, I'm going to support you and I'm going to do what I need to do, but I'm not paying all of this money if you're not serious about it. And so one of the questions is, what advice would you offer youth from low income communities with limited resources who are wanting to excel in sports. Because now here we are, right? Where it's almost, especially in sports like golf, volleyball, soccer, if you're not playing, if you're not paying to play, it's very hard for you to excel. So what advice do you have for kids who may not be able to afford all of this? Then what?
I mean, I at one point I really couldn't afford to really play golf, but we had people in our community was like, "Well, we'll give so Sugar can go to this tournament." And sometimes I had to fundraise for certain things. So whether I had to like sell candy for $2, whatever the case may be, like that's kind of how my mom made a way for me and me making a way for myself because I sold candy at school as well. To get certain things, far as like golf cleats and clothes and stuff of that nature. And I also like when it came to basketball, I played on the free teams
Mhm.
and I became good at what I was doing, and that's how I was able to get on the more advanced team. But like you said, like those things cost more money. So then my team would do fundraisers for the kids who were coming from those communities. And
Mhm.
then they will all help fundraise so that I could go on those trips. And I think that's the thing. I'm like, man, like I was just so grateful to be on a team like that, where everybody, parents who could afford to go, like they would just pay. And then we would do like car washes, sell donuts, sell candy, so that the two people who couldn't afford can now afford to go on those trips. So I just say, continue to just work hard in what you do. Somebody's going to see you somewhere,
Mhm.
whether they see you outside at the park, they see you a million miles away. Like they're going to see you and they're going to ask you to come be on their team, and they're going to ask you to come for free,
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
because that's how what happened to me when I went to the EYBL circuit and the Nike team. Like some kids had to like pay, but I couldn't afford to pay. But my talent, I was so good that it was like, no, like we're gonna find a way for you to come. And they had to come pick me up sometimes 30 minutes because I couldn't find a ride.
That's right.
Um, I ain't had no
I,
money.
I think we have to do a better job, Sugar. I don't know. It's like, transportation is always an issue, right? Especially for kids in low income communities. And so, um, yeah, I want to go and I want to play. And you may even scholarship me to do it, or I may even, work. Like you said, I may sell candy, I may do whatever I need to do. But then there's that transportation thing, right? And the safety thing, because I may be able to get there, but is it the safest way for me to get there? And those are all major concerns. And I wonder, is there something that, again, the sports community needs to do to assist with young people being able to have access even to sports?
Um, I mean, it's plenty of things that we can do. I think, far as like coaches and mentors,
Mhm.
if you have the time, if you have the transportation to get somebody to the practice, if you're going in that route or that direction, you may go out of your direction to pick that kid up.
Sure.
I would say just take a chance on that kid. Give that kid an opportunity they wouldn't get. You never know what kind of kid you may create, or what kind of opportunity you may create for that kid in the future. And I know when some people look back on me, they're like, "Oh yeah, I gave her a ride." And when I see them people now, like I'm like, "Thank you, like for what you did for me, because you
Yeah,
didn't have to do that." My
that's
best friend didn't have to. She stayed all the way on the other side of my city, and her mom used to come get me every day so that I could come to practice. But she didn't have to do that. She
sure.
just wanted me to be able to play the sport.
Yep. Yep.
So I mean, if you can, like whatever resources you have, donate them to the community, and then maybe just picking somebody up for a ride to practice.
And I think, you touched on something really funny. You said a mom did it. And I think, especially with sports like basketball and, some of these other sports that are typically seen as, boy sports, right? That when it's time, even on the rec level, right? When it's time for someone to volunteer to coach, right? Generally, it's dads. It's dads like, oh, whether they have the ability or not, right? whether they have the skill or the know how or not, it's generally dads that'll step up and say, I'll volunteer and coach my kids' team, or I'll be a coach, or I'll help out, I'll assist. I really wish, and if players are out here listening, if mothers are out here listening, what's really important for girls in sports is that we see more women in there. And so I really hope that moms, whether you have the skill or not, because trust me, plenty of dads don't, you know, whether you have the skill or not, please step up and volunteer and
Please.
be that mentor. If for no other reason, if for no other reason but to mentor young girls and be in that space so that they can see you and they can see, because we can, you know, if at the rec centers and other coaches and directors, we can train coaches to do the basics, right? What's more important is that you show up for them, that you show up and that you're there and you're a mentor for them. And so, yeah, I just want to see more women saying, I'll do it. I'll do it. I won't just be snack
Please.
mom, right? Yeah, yeah.
Don't be just a snack mom, man. The snack mom is important. Don't get me wrong.
Very, very.
But volunteer for those coaching jobs. Like you can
Yeah,
do it. Dads do it with no experience. They just out there just to be out there.
yeah,
But we need to see more women in all sports, not just like
absolutely.
on the rec level, but like on the collegiate, on the
Yep,
professional, wherever it's needed to see more women
yep.
out there.
I agree. I agree. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We're coming down to our, to the end of our hour.
Already?
I know this happens so quickly and the conversation is so good. And so we've got some time, Sugar. You know what I want to ask you. You know what I want to ask
All
you.
right, go ahead. You get a free pass on this app.
Okay. So you have finished your master's degree. What is your master's in?
Sports industry management.
Sports industry management, and you're out here coaching. And I know you talked a little bit about what potentially could be next, right? Is there a doctorate coming out of you?
They asked me to go back to school. I'm just like, I just graduated. I need some time in between. It took me almost 7 years, 6.5 years to get my master's. I think it's probably gonna take me another at least eight, 8 years for me to go back.
I
Especially
agree.
it's a two jobs now.
I
Where at first I was just like a professional student athlete, and now to be like double coach, I don't think it's gonna be too much on my plate for me to do it right now.
I hear you. I
So
hear you.
maybe one lay off. Maybe I will take a few classes here and there.
And you can spread it out. You can spread it out. I see it. I'm going to manifest it because I see it. I can absolutely see Dr. Sugar Rogers. Absolutely see it. And I think that it's something that, number one, your community would go crazy, right? To see that accomplishment from you. Your teammates and your coaches and everyone who knows you. I think we already see it as you already are Dr. Sugar Rogers with what you've put out there. So I'm gonna be sitting waiting in the winds, waiting for you to call me up and say, all right, I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm doing this. So I'll just wait patiently. I won't push, but I'll wait patiently.
That sounds like a push in the back to me. But nah, I definitely give you a call when it's happening. I
Yeah.
think I just have to really like be in the right headspace.
Oh,
Because what
absolutely.
happened when I went back for my master's, I was like, I wanted to do it 2 years prior. So here's the
Sure.
story behind that. I wanted to do it 2 years prior, and I didn't have the opportunity. I'm like, at this point, like I'm not gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
That's just how I was thinking. And 2 years later, it was like, all right, like you can come back now. And I was like, dang it, I wanted this 2 years ago. Like, why now? So
Yeah.
I was like, you asked for this, like you prayed for this, like embark on this opportunity. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then that's just how, if you spiritual, like that's just how God works
Yep.
sometimes. Like, you don't
And
get it.
it'll present itself again. It's gonna present itself again. I promise you it will.
Yeah.
It will. It will. It will. We got another question, Sugar. Um, what are your top 2 or 3 coaching tips?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
I don't know. You might have to reach back to me on social media for this one because this is gonna take me some time to think of. I can't just throw nothing out there at this very moment.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially since you're just dipping into this. I mean, this is, it's relatively new.
Yeah, I ain't got my toes wet yet. I ain't got my toes wet yet in the water.
So how do the girls, how do the women, because these are women now,
Mhm.
the your ex teammates at the Aces, how do they receive you now? You're in a different role, so how are they receiving you?
Oh, they receive it with open arms. I just remember like being on the Zoom and I had been texting them like, before the season was starting.
Mhm.
So I came in on the Zoom and everybody was like,
What?
I couldn't tell y'all, like I couldn't, like it just felt so bad, like because I couldn't tell
Yeah.
them I really wanted to. And then I remember like getting here, having to go through like the whole hiring process. But then when I got on the court, like everybody just embracing me and just
Yeah.
excited for me to be a coach. I was a player's coach, but they like excited for me to be in this role. Like,
So are
hey,
they listening? Do they listen to you or are they like, sugar?
no, they actually really do like listen to me, like and listen to what I, say. Like I don't do nothing crazy, like get on the line and let's run some sprints type stuff.
Right.
When I like talk, they like listen and they receive me very well.
Good. Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching you out there. Now I'm gonna be zoning in on I probably won't even be watching the game. I'll be looking over at the sideline to watch you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna be looking for that.
I've heard I like cheer like a players did because I'd be like, oh, and I'd be throwing them a three sign. I'm all into it, but it's just, I mean, that's how I am when it comes to games and just
Yeah.
cheering the
Yep.
players on because they put a lot, a lot goes into playing the game.
So do you miss playing and draining all those 3 pointers? That's a question.
Uh, Not really. I mean, I roll out of bed and I'm like, I don't have to run today, and I can eat whatever I want. I mean, I've gained some weight here and there, but
Sure.
I mean, I do miss like sometimes out there, but for the most part, like I am in a new passion. Like I enjoy being able to teach and
Sure.
share my knowledge with these young women. So once you discover a new passion, it's like, oh yeah, like I enjoy playing for that moment, and here's another moment, and I enjoy
Sure.
coaching.
So what are some of your favorite moments? Can you think of just in throughout your career? What's been some of your favorites?
I mean, the relationships I was able to build with some of the players that I still have now, those are like my top. But like obviously winning a championship, winning six women of the year, probably was on my top as well because it was just a season full of up and down, and I was able to overcome um, that experience of starting, then coming off the bench. That like took a toll on me mentally
Sure.
because you work so hard to be a starter. For them now, you have to make this sacrifice for the betterment of the team, and this is what it looked like.
Hmm.
Was like, oh man, like okay, cool.
Yeah.
But just to be able to overcome that, and then going to the championship last year, although we didn't win, that was a great experience. And playing in a bubble because ooh, that was on a whole nother level, just like mentally, spiritually, and physically.
Yeah, because you're trying to not only stay healthy, but you're literally trying to stay healthy and not get COVID and not pass it to anybody else. And
Yeah,
that's a whole nother level of stress. Yeah.
um, in this one like set area, and most people like sometimes compare it to jail, but it's not like that in a
Yeah.
sense. Like that's kind of what people compare it to because I know people like in jail, like, no,
Sure.
that's
It
not.
ain't nothing like that. It's
But
nothing
you're just
like
like
that.
confined in this area and you cannot get out. Like you see the
Yeah.
same people every day. I'm like, I know like I couldn't go to jail
Sure.
because I wouldn't be able to deal with it mentally.
Sure.
But that was just a challenge I was able to overcome and just be a part of having 144 players in the same room from all
Yeah.
the teams. When we was fighting for like social justice and the different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That's in my top. What else is in my top? There's so many things I could
So
talk about.
many things.
Yeah.
So many experiences. And, did you ever think as a little girl that basketball would take you all the different places that you've gone?
No, I mean, I didn't see basketball in my future.
Mm.
I didn't see basketball like playing professionally in my future until I was a freshman in college, and I had won the Big East Rookie of the Year award, and I was sitting on the podium with Maya Moore and Tina Charles,
Right.
who was projected to go top like in the WNBA. So I was like, oh, like I can really, I can really do this.
Yeah.
And that's like when my dream of like going to the WNBA became. So I was just like, when I did get drafted, this was like a surreal moment for me.
Yeah. 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 I can't imagine, again, I've got girls that are athletes, and I know for certain that they would probably not have. Maybe they would have, but not the course that they've done it, certainly not as early as they did, have traveled to the places that they've traveled, met the people that they've met,
Mhm.
had the experiences that they've had it not been for them being an athlete. And
That's a
it's
true statement.
yeah, it's one of those things that you could never, I don't think they ever even thought of for themselves, right? I've got an older daughter that played overseas. I know in her wildest dreams, she never thought for a minute that that's where, volleyball would take her, but it did. And
Mhm.
so I just really want young people everywhere to have that opportunity, right? That it's not just reserved for those that can afford to play, that all of our kids in every single community have that opportunity to have these experiences that sports provides for them. So yeah, I just, again, this has been fun, a great conversation, one that I've been looking forward to having with you. I know for one, we at Up to Us Sports are really, really proud of the work that you're doing, just with young people, with telling your story and sharing your story and your background and how you've come through all of that. I think it's such important work. And I hope you just continue to do it. Continue to do it.
Well, thank you, thank you. And just thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
It was,
Absolutely.
fun to be a part of Up to Us Sports and just being able to use my resources. But whatever it is that y'all need, just being able to give back to the community in any way that y'all see fit. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity.
Awesome. Awesome. If you all want to get a copy of Sugar's book, we've got a link in the chat. Please get a copy of it. Awesome book. I think someone mentioned before they read it in a night. It's like one of those that you just don't put down. You just fly through it because it's such an easy read. It's such an important read. And very well done. Very well done. So as a mother, I know that your mom is super proud of the young lady that you've turned into. So thank you. Thank you. And with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our first one-on-one with Up to Us Sports. Stay tuned for many, many more. Hopefully we can get some more extraordinary people like Sugar Rogers to join us. Have a good night.
See ya.